Well, first, we are very heartened to hear that there's a working session
Mhm.
in October.
Mhm.
I'm kind of new to this, so I didn't quite know. Well, first of all, is there a definite date, and is the public invited to participate? And also, what might the results be from that? That we might
Right.
have to-
Yeah, all good questions. There is a definite date. It's October 9th.
Okay.
Now, sometimes tentative agendas get shuffled around depending on, something's over it, but that's the date for now.
Okay.
If it changes, it'll be on the tentative agenda, available on the website. It's a work session to give the council an opportunity to hear, the sort of lay of the land on the 5G discussion. So that will be, I'm assuming it'll be a little bit of discussion about our legal standing and some of our legal actions. It'll be a discussion probably around sort of on the ground, what our guidelines and siting restrictions are, what our agreements are around the rights of way. And then I'm sure there will be some reference to the health concerns and the health studies and the sorts of questions that you all have been asking. So it's really, it's not a decision-making moment. It is a moment for council to get more information. There could well be a request by councilors for staff to come back and provide more information on any number of things.
Is it just staff?
Yeah, work sessions are just conversations between staff and council. They are not but the public is in the audience and can hear. And then of course you always have the opportunity of then coming back and saying, I heard this in the work session. You can write to individual councilors, you can write to all of us, you can come to public forum as you've done before.
Is it possible to get a list of questions for the city attorney to research beforehand? So, because we've already put out a lot of questions that we want answered and kind of got some hazy answers back on what the legal authority was for the city to act on it. And so it seems like all those questions are out there, and it would be a shame to go into a work session to then further ask these questions that have already been asked, to then go research. So there's like 2 months now before October. Could a couple of counselors add that to an agenda item for the attorney to research?
You can. I will tell you that one of the good models for this is the 350 groups that advocate on work on climate change, and they will often send a fairly thoughtful email to us about questions that they think that we should ask of staff and specific information. So you can send that to me. You are welcome to sort of put your very specific questions down that you hope that we would ask those questions in a work session. If there's specific things that you think are unclear, whether that our legal counsel has interpreted legal authority differently than you're interpreting it, you could suggest to counsel. The counsel get some clarification during the work session on that, and that would be a perfectly correct way to go about it.
So a couple of counselors could ask the city attorney to.
They can make a
research.
request for information, hoping that this will be included in the work session.
Yeah. Okay.
So you can just suggest. Counselors will do what they will do, but
Sure,
you can
sure.
suggest to them, these might be some questions that you could ask for more clarification.
Okay. I just had another one. So after the work session, or other than the work session, are there any other steps maybe the council's taking more immediately to sort of halt the deployment of these 5Gs? I just had one installed down the road from me. It was very, very concerning because once they're there, just one flip, and there's nothing I can do about it. I'll just be exposed.
Right, so this is this sort of important conversation which we have tried, kind of repeatedly to explain the lay of the land in terms of our local authority. I refer to that in that speech that I gave to the U.S. Conference of Mayors. We are in a deep legal battle with the FCC around control of our local rights of way. So the fundamental question here is to what extent can we control that right of way? To what extent can we charge for the use of that right of way? What is the FCC allowing? And the FCC actions beginning in last September have chipped away at our local control over our rights of way. So that's the most fundamental decision. Secondary to that, we are restricted to, at this point, we are restricted in terms of how new telecommunications facilities are installed. We are restricted to siting and design guidelines. So we do have those siting and design guidelines in place. So we are not empowered as a city to create guidelines that would make it impossible for the telecommunications industry to install the equipment that has been allowed and deemed compliant with FCC rules. So this is where we run up against your particular request for a moratorium and our interpretation of our legal standing. You are not seeing this the way the city is seeing it in terms of our legal authority. And so what we are saying to you is, we are by law required to create guidelines that allow telecommunications industries to install their equipment as long as it complies with FCC regulations. And at this point, there are no FCC regulations that pertain to the health implications of 5G.
But other cities have had very successful ordinances using other excuses, like the aesthetic one, even doing their recertification or re-registration annually. That has actually acted as a deterrent for a lot of these companies.
Well,
Are we even looking at any of those things?
So some of the things that we have done, and one of them is recent. So I want to back up 1 second. Many of these cities are farther behind Eugene. We're ahead of them in our regulations because we instituted, as soon as the 1996 statute passed in 1997, we instituted those design guidelines regulating the telecommunications industry. There are a lot of cities that didn't do that, and so they've been doing it in this past year because of the pressure. But we are actually ahead of a lot of those cities in terms of what we've done. Our next step, and Brian has more information about this, but we now have a new guideline instituted in the beginning of July that when a telecommunications industry, when they want to site a new antenna, there's a 500-foot circumference circle around that site, and the city is asking those telecommunications companies to only install it on the highest traffic major corridor. So the goal is to pull these antennae away from small residential streets and have them on the transit corridor or on the larger corridors. So that's our new regulation.
But what about the old ones that are already up?
They're in.
Right near houses,
They're in.
schools and everything.
They're in.
They can't be changed.
They're in. No, they can't be changed. And so we are tightening those guidelines. And and the numbers that I have are there 51 antenna that have been set up. No, 51 permits, 27
Correct.
actually
Yeah,
installed so
27,
far.
yeah.
And it has been located, I think most of them are in South Eugene.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a kind of a national trend for the telecommunications industry, is they will go in the areas where they think there's going to be the highest adoption of 5G. So they'll target those neighborhoods. So one of the critiques that we have as a city of the FCC is that the claim of the 5G and the reduced fees that FCC is allowing the telecommunications companies to charge, as the telecom industry is saying, well, lower fees will enable us to extend this out to the rural areas. Well, the reality is they're not going to extend it to the rural areas. They're going to extend it to the dense areas where they think there's going to be a high level of adoption of 5G. So we think that's an empty claim by the FCC.
So the one that I actually have near my house,
Right.
I can't do anything about that.
It's there. Yeah, it's there.
So all I can do is move.
It's there. It's like any other city infrastructure, right? You can't say, I don't like my sidewalk. I want the city to dig it up.
Sure. Is it my turn to ask a question? Okay. Do you want to pass a moratorium? If you could.
If I could, I would. We don't have the legal authority to do it. And as I've said to you, and I've said to council in public forums before, the council is not going to embark on a pathway that is going to open us to a lawsuit that we don't have legal standing to win.
And did you hear, maybe somebody else had this question, but did you learn, we read to you last night about from the amicus brief from 53 senators that said the FCC does not have jurisdiction over cities and states.
We're totally on board with that. I mean, we're in a lawsuit with it in the Ninth Circuit Court. If you'll read my speech, we're there.
So then you could do a moratorium.
Well, that amicus brief does not have the force of law, you know. It's an amicus brief.
Well,
it's not a law.
Well,
it's an opinion. It's an opinion that is
it's-
given as friend of the court.
Well, it's stating the constitutionality of that
I have
document.
no reference to when, where, to whom that was submitted, what case that was. So maybe you could provide more information about that?
We wrote it in the paper. It was written in the paper what case, but you know, it's worth our while, your while, our while to protect our city, to look deeper into that
So I will.
issue.
So I want to just, I totally appreciate that and the sense of urgency and the desire for that.
Mhm.
And I will say that if the city felt we had legal standing, we would pursue that, because we have taken the telecom industry to court, as I mentioned several times, successfully 3 times. We've defeated appeals of those decisions successfully all 3 times. We will take them to court if we have to. When I went to the U.S. Conference of Mayors, I encouraged other mayors to be willing to do that hard legal work. So I am with that hard legal work. You have a particular interpretation of what you think we are authorized to do under the law. We have a different
Well,
interpretation.
it's not us, it was 53 senators.
And we agree with
the
them.
Congress.
We agree with them, but that is not quite the same. Saying that the FCC has overstepped their bounds, we are taking them to court on that basis.
But
but-
there's
but-
no need to go to
but-
court because you already have the jurisdiction. So
That's
you
where we
don't
do-
have to fight in court, you
But
could
that's-
just say,
But the FCC doesn't agree with that, and they are the ruling authority here.
well, the FCC is not the ruling authority, you're the ruling
No,
authority.
that's where our interpretation and yours are not the same.
That won't get resolved.
It won't get resolved
But,
here.
okay, I'll ask my next question.
Yeah.
Thank you for answering so graciously. Okay, the next question I have is, at this point in time, are you and the council convinced 5G is safe? If so, then what peer-reviewed independent research do you have to back up your belief? If not, why are you willing to risk our safety?
No, we are not convinced it was safe. No, we are not advocating for its implementation. No, we would not like it to be implemented before health studies are done. We don't conduct health studies, and as I have said before, FCC has the authority to deem what telecommunications equipment is compliant with their regulations. They have deemed this compliant. The city of Eugene is not empowered to overrule the FCC on that.
So we just harm the public.
This is much bigger than the city of Eugene, as well you know.
There must be something to do in this situation where the public is at risk, where the environment is at
Yes,
risk.
absolutely. The climate change people would say the same thing. We have a federal government that's not acting on our behalf on this and on other issues. This is not the only issue in which the federal government is not doing what we need for them to do. Absolutely.
There
Yeah,
is
but
an
climate-
aesthetic ordinance that you can do, though. That is something you can do.
And we do have an aesthetic ordinance. We do have guidelines.
Well, we
and
could
it's
probably
in
do a
place.
stronger one, maybe.
And
That is something that we continue to look at. The guidelines that we have right now that you see online, those are ones that were created years and years ago. So
Right.
this isn't anything that we just started to
No,
take
you
a
can
look
update
at.
it.
In fact, we have with that 500-foot radius. That's something that it was said July 3rd is when we started enacting that, and working with the contractors.
100-foot radius?
500.
500. Oh,
So-
but
so-
it's not, as it's been implemented in town, it's 200 feet from the high school, it's 5 feet from people's driveway.
So
Yeah.
the 500-foot radius is, yeah, so let's say somebody wants to put one here, the
Mhm.
contractors puts in a permit
Right, I
to
understand.
place one here, and from that, we're asking them to look at a 500-foot radius to see if you can get that off of the residential street, so it's basically a matrix, so, to see if that can go on an arterial street first, and then from an arterial, which would be one of,
Yes.
like 6th and 7th.
Who are you asking for permission to do that?
So we're working with the contractors.
What
The utility
contractors?
so the utility companies are the
The
companies that are
contract-
installing
You will.
the small cell facilities.
And those are
No.
the actual telecom companies?
That's
or-
Mass Tech.
Yeah, typically they're
That's who's
contractors.
doing it.
So
For the-
telecom companies are contracting with, contracting the installation of this equipment.
Because it just seems like there's a lot of leeway from absolutely prohibiting, all 5G, which could, potentially damage businesses and whatnot, to then creating certain ordinances and certain zoning measures to keep it well away from residential neighborhoods that are getting 4G, which is pretty quick, getting fast internet video downloads. So
Right, yeah, so I think, this
Challenging
is,
that a little bit more, right?
we're pushing, so I think this new guideline, we're trying to tighten up where it goes and how it goes before it goes any farther. And I think is for us, an iterative process if we learn what we can do, how we can push it, how far we can go. So yeah, absolutely, that's the conversation, I would
Or
say, for
like-
council.
But what about the poor people that have it right in front of their home right now? And one of them I know has an electrosensitive granddaughter.
Right, I
So
should
what do we
I
do
know.
for them?
Right. So, I don't have an answer for that. I don't have an answer right now. I mean, they're legally permitted, they're in, it's not yet 5G. We don't know at what point that will happen. There could be that there are more court cases, that there's more evidence that comes down before this actually comes to our community, so the landscape may shift a little bit, but there's nothing more definitive that I can say to those individual homeowners right now.
And it's debatable whether they were put in legally or not, because there was no public comment. There was no one asked the people who got the device right in their front yard, is this okay with you? We're putting this in here. Do you have a pacemaker? Are you electrosensitive? I mean, there was
Right.
no regard. It's
Right.
very wrong.
Yes, so I appreciate that, and I appreciate that, this, in that sense, this is a new territory for us to sort of realize where we need to be ahead of the game on this technology, so I appreciate the hazard of that, it kind of, in terms of how the city functions and infrastructure in general, all infrastructure does not go to a public hearing kind of public process, right? When we fix the sidewalks, we don't go to a neighborhood and say, do you want these sidewalks fixed or not?
Well, this
right?
is a
But
potentially
no,
dangerous.
I understand that. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
that's why I'm saying, this is a new landscape for us to have to adjust to that, because traditionally, infrastructure is something that it's voted by the taxpayers, it's voted, these improvements are gonna be made, but it's not a public process debate about whether that, except on the large scope, we vote on a transportation plan, but except on that sort of implementation, once we agree on a policy, that implementation plan doesn't go through public hearings.
So if you vote on a transportation plan, why not vote on a telecommunications plan?
So we could. So that is why I'm saying, we're learning as we go about what we can do, what we should do, more about this technology, so we're adjusting those guidelines. And so it could be that at some point in the future that the council would consider an ordinance that might modify our existing guidelines or existing direction to staff about how it's implemented. I can't predict what that would look like. We'll have our work session. We learn as we go. But yeah,
But
that
this
option
is-
is possible.
This is why, though, you tell her that it's in, can't go back. These are things that we're learning. We're learning a lot during this time. We hope to make these improvements. This is all language that sounds like we need a moratorium to slow things down until we start moving forward, because it sounds like everyone's way behind the game, and without these health studies, we could be inflicting a lot of danger upon the citizens of Eugene. And so we've already had some cases where they can't come out. And so, a brief moratorium doesn't say it's prohibited. So it sounds like it's within the section 704 of the Telecommunications Act that we're not prohibiting, we're just slowing it down until we can regain our composure and our certain processes to allow this amplified technology that's 1,000 times stronger than the 4G to be implemented. That seems fairly reasonable, and that seems fairly reasonable in court to argue that if they wanted to sue us, on
The
that.
city do our due diligence.
And plus, otherwise you're opening yourselves up as personally liable, and all the city council members and the city manager are opening themselves up to personal liability from every document you've signed for allowing these permits to be handed down. So,
Yes, you know, I am more concerned about the health of the community than I am about my personal liability in this case, and I am totally with you that a moratorium would be a great pathway. I am also not convinced that we have the legal authority to do that without a lawsuit, and it's not a lawsuit we would win. So it is not in the public's interest for us to go after a legal action that will cost us time and money and not be successful. If we're going to go for legal action, as we have done in the Ninth Circuit Court, we're going to do it when we know we are on the strongest legal footing, so we will win. We do not want to go and lose. So I hear you, I'm sympathetic with it, and we have not only our own legal counsel, we have lawyers that we're working with in our suit in the district court, we have lobbyists we're working with, we are working with the Fazio staff, we are working with people who are knowledgeable in this industry, and we are doing our due diligence. Our staff spend a lot of time talking to other cities who are working on this issue. So we are not ignoring, here's my 5G notebook. We are not ignoring the information you send. We are following up on that information. We are pursuing our options. So I recognize, as Councilor Clark said on Monday night, our timeline may not match your timeline, but we are working on this issue. So the fact that you're not getting exactly what you asked for today in the way you want it is not a no from us. We're working through what we consider to be our best and strongest legal options.
I just want to say one thing about this. Sebastopol, California, did do a moratorium for 6 months, and then they extended it because they had no regulations in there right away. I actually called and talked to them. And so then during that time of the moratorium, they were able to create a really strong ordinance. And they have had no applications since they've done it to the state. No
And they were
applications.
sued.
Yes, well, okay, so, Sebastopol.
They were not sued, that's right.
Sebastopol is not Eugene. They're not in the same situation. They were far behind us and where we are. I will say I have a call with the mayor of Tampa next week because I met her at the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and she's frantic because she is being pummeled with demands by multiple entities to put in this 5G, and she's got the same challenge. So, and she's a larger city, so she's much more of a target. Sebastopol is way down the list in terms of when these they're not going to bother with it because they're rolling out on bigger cities. They're going to target bigger cities first where there's going to be a high adoption rate.
But they did do a moratorium, and they
Right,
weren't
you will,
sued.
but they're not, okay, if you'll read my speech, you will notice that I refer, where did I put it? I gave it to you. so you just
I
look
might
at
have put it in my
Okay.
purse.
No.
Is that it? Yeah.
Here you go.
Here it is. Okay, so I make a reference in this speech to the challenges that we have currently with the FCC, and that in preliminary findings for the small cell and franchise fee order, the industry identified Eugene versus Comcast as a major hurdle for 5G deployment. We are in their sights. We are not Sebastopol. We are more visible. And so when we take an action, it will be noticed. So we want to do it on strong legal footing. We will not fly under the radar. Sebastopol might, we won't.
But isn't that a good thing? So
It's only a
Look
good
at- look
thing.
how unique-
It's a good thing if we're on strong legal footing. It's not a good thing if we go with a weak case that we can't
but
defend.
the anti-commandeering doctrine, all these doctrines say that we're on a very strong case. I don't know what else we're waiting for.
Well, so that's a legal, so that is to paraphrase from what our legal counsel, Catherine Brotherton, said to you on Monday night. There may be ways in which that anti-commandeering document could come into play at some point in the future, but in the specific way in which you have asked for it to be used, she does not feel that that is a correct application. So it's not a wholesale, like, this might never be relevant. It might be, but in the way you are particularly asking for it, she does not read that as accurate. So I have to trust a lawyer on this. Her interpretation,
She
she's not
steered
working
you
alone.
wrong before.
I don't think so.
So-
All right, yes,
We need
next
to move
question.
on to the
Okay,
questions.
this is an appropriate question to
Mhm.
this issue.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm very curious if you've read the anti-commandeering doctrine that we gave to you, the information that we gave to you. Or are you completely dependent on your city attorney to decide whether the anti-commandeering doctrine doctrine does or does not allow you to do a moratorium. And I just want to say one last thing. I want to add this because of what we're saying. Have you read the case of the state of Oregon versus Donald Trump, which we gave you excerpts of? Because in that, it is extremely, sorry, that's my hearing aid. It's extremely obvious that the Attorney General of Oregon is saying that the federal government cannot make cities do anything. It's very powerful, very clear. It has to be read. It has to be read and understood and read again and understood again, and then you will see how clear it is. If you haven't read it yourself.
I will tell you that I have read it. I read it
Okay.
when you sent it to me.
Good.
And I have listened to legal counsel, and I do listen to legal counsel because I'm not a lawyer.
Also, we submitted to you the a verbal, what do you call it? It was a document of Ajit Pai saying this very same thing, that we cannot commandeer the
Right.
cities.
I have read that.
He said that to
His
the
board members.
FCC,
His board
to
members,
his,
yeah.
his board members. So there you have it. We have a strong,
So
yeah.
this is legal territory that I am not equipped to navigate. I don't have the expertise to navigate it. I'm not a constitutional lawyer. I'm not going to hazard a guess on that. The fact that the same term is used in multiple ways is the same term used in multiple ways to make multiple arguments. That, for me, is not enough for me to say I'm clear on my legal footing. So yes, I am going to count on legal counsel. We have layers of legal counsel in this. We are not the only city that is concerned about this issue, and they are all using legal counsel, and we are tracking that.
Is it possible to have a legal, like a constitutional lawyer come to the work session and might be a little bit more knowledgeable to local authority, municipality authority, and their rights under the law? Because I think the city's attorney is very, very strongly advocating not getting into any liability trouble, doesn't want the trouble. And I think they're a little less concerned about the overarching health concerns. And it'd be great to actually have an attorney of the people who are concerned about this be representing them in a legal fashion at the work session, so there's at least a balance of opinion.
A couple suggestions around that. First of all, I will suggest to you that the city of Eugene is deeply concerned about the implications of the rollout of this technology. So there is no desire to whitewash it or walk away from it. We're quite concerned about it, and we're very concerned about the telecommunications industry overriding our local control to the and abusing our public space and our public resources and endangering our citizenry. So we're not taking that lightly. So when our city attorney weighs in on her interpretation of law, that is exactly what she is doing. She is simply weighing in on her interpretation of the law. And I understand that you disagree with that interpretation, and there may be a good legal argument going forward. We're not there, but I think it's on the radar, and I think particularly in my latest conversation with her, as this Ninth Circuit case, you should be tracking this Ninth Circuit case, because that's where the action is right now.
What about Colin's question? I mean, is it possible to get a constitutional lawyer? Obviously, the city attorney is out of her element. Yes, because she's not a constitutional lawyer. She's not familiar with the power of this anti-commandeering doctrine and the city's powers. So is it possible to get a constitutional lawyer to help out, to help you, to help the city, to help us?
So two things. At this work session, no, because the work sessions are staff-driven work sessions. They do the research and they do the reporting. We do have a different sort of model, which we call a workshop, in which we bring outside experts to testify. So it could very well be that one of the outcomes that counselors could ask, if there's enough interest in that, there could be an outcome where the council would say, well, we need a workshop on this sort of broader context. So that's the first thing, just in sort of straight how we function as a city council. But I would say to all of you, if you have someone at the University of Oregon who is a constitutional scholar, for instance, that you think would provide an interpretation that you wanted to share with council, that can be part of the public record and you can share it. I would just advise you to do that in a way in which it is a kind of true and precise legal argument, not snatches of an amicus brief here and snatches of a statement there, but in context, because it's impossible for us to rely on something where you've just taken an excerpt out of something. We don't know what the overall context is. We don't know what it was in response to. I think even the anti-commandeering, when the Attorney General was speaking to it, it was on a different issue. And so that's not helpful to us because it feels too unclear. So that would just be my suggestion to you.
That's good advice. I was going to ask if we could actually help out in that way, get people who have the time. Because I know that your staff is very work. I know the lawyer must have other things on her plate. But if we could have somebody from maybe the U of O who knows more about this and who has the time to actually dig into it, and who could help the city make a stronger case, would that be a welcome thing?
I think just information, but I think pretty solid information. So if you're going to if you're going to make a legal argument, do it in a proper legal way. Yeah.
The city attorney's was not a solid evidence at all. It was maybe 2 paragraphs with no backup of why.
Right.
There was no why. There was just you can't ignore or violate a federal regulatory program without saying where did you find that? Who says so? So we can get you much clearer legal information than you received from the city attorney.
Right. She was
And
asked for an interpretation of our status,
it should
and she offered it.
outbalance your city attorney's information because it's relatively weak. As far as a legal argument, it's quite weak.
Well, she was not asked to do a major case review study for the city council.
But you're
She was
asking
asked
us
to-
to
she
do
was-
that.
You are asked. I am just saying.
She's an attorney.
I am just
I
saying.
understand.
I'm just
Yeah.
saying. She responded to what council. You made a request of council in a public forum. A councilor turned to the city attorney and said, "Could you give us some insights on that?" She gave her insights.
Right.
We're not pretending that was a major, robust legal research
No, I
piece of
understand,
research.
but you're
So-
asking that from us.
I'm just-
You're
I'm just-
saying.
You can do
is-
whatever you want to do. I'm
Right.
just suggesting to you that
Right.
if you want to be constructive in your input to us, that bits and pieces scattered are going to be less helpful to us than something that is
I understand.
well constructed.
I
That's all.
understand.
Can I ask then, why haven't you asked her to do a robust investigation
Of
of
the constitutional.
anti-commandeering?
Well,
Why haven't you asked
Yeah,
her to
it's
be
an
very
important
robust
issue.
because we're
It's an
about to be
important issue.
irradiated on a mass scale?
Well, I haven't yet. It could come up, but I am at this point accepting her initial perspective and also accepting that she is at work at this Ninth Circuit Court decision, and what comes out of that decision will influence and what she needs to respond to that decision. So again, that is the legal case on the docket now. That's the legal case we're prepared for. That's the legal case we're working on. That's the legal case that will provide our foundation for our local control of our rights of way, which is the fundamental issue here. That's the fundamental issue. Everything else is beyond that issue. But once we can ensure our control of our local rights of way, then we have the foundation for other discussions. So my only feeling is, first things first. We have to do the first piece, and the first piece on our desk is what's currently happening at the FCC in terms of the infringement of our local control of our rights of way. That's our first order of business.
By the way,
And
the
that-
Ninth Circuit decision, any idea when that might be coming due, or?
I don't know. I don't know, and it's hard from the outside to know.
That
I don't know.
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. That litigation that you're talking about, the city is involved in, is not using the anti-commandeering doctrine when the Oregon Attorney General was using that as her argument against the federal
Yes.
government. So
That's exactly my point. That's exactly my point.
what is that point?
The point is that this is a deep dive into a legal argument. The Attorney General is using it. It's not being used in the Ninth Circuit Court. That tells me that there are that there are different interpretations, that there are different applicability.
Well,
I'm not a
people don't
lawyer. I
know.
can't do
Yeah,
that.
they
I don't
don't
know.
know.
It
Or
isn't,
they're
that-
not.
it isn't
I don't
that
believe that.
common-
I don't.
It's not
well,
common knowledge.
we're in the Ninth Circuit Court. I think they would be aware of the anti-commandeering
Well, they
doctrine.
might not be thinking
Well,
of it.
I'm talking about the lawyers, not the
Yeah.
judges.
The lawyers,
The judges may know about
I think
it.
they will. I think they will be familiar with it.
I mean,
That's-
Colin,
That's San
curious.
Jose, the case is the San Jose versus the FCC, that's the overarching case that we're in?
It's the League of Cities.
Colin is a legal student, and he told me that they hardly cover anti-commandeering. Is that right?
That's true, yeah,
No, but
So-
it's what you learn in
So
practice
there may not
over
be a
years
lot
of practice.
There
It's
may
not
not
just
be
what
a
you
lot
learn
of
in law
lawyers
school,
or
right?
attorneys that even know
Yeah,
about
I
it.
actually spoke to several lawyers, and they weren't familiar with anti-commandeering doctrine.
So it
Well,
could just be
I get it. At
ignorance.
any rate,
Yeah.
Okay.
it's not mine to argue.
Okay, I have another question.
I'd have it, okay.
I don't think
Becky
she's
hasn't
coming.
gone
I was supposed
Okay,
to go
I
after
thought we were
Sabrina.
gonna do two questions each,
No,
but
but
that's all right.
I have two questions.
Okay.
Okay, I'll read it to you.
Okay.
This huge 5G cell project requires a study of the environmental effects of having so many antennas next to each other and very near homes, businesses, hospitals, and schools, broadcasting potentially harmful 5G radio signals with unknown short and long-term consequences. This has never been done before in Eugene and will likely have unknown impact on the people and environment. Does the city have an environmental impact study, and if not, why not?
The short answer is no, and we don't have one because we don't do that work. We don't do environmental studies in that sense. That's doesn't fall within the purview of the city of Eugene. So environmental impact statements are federal. That's federally regulated. Environmental Protection Agency. I don't know if there's anything that relates to telecom.
They are doing that in
Anyone
other
can
cities.
do-
That they are
They
doing
can
that in
do-
other
cities
cities. It's
can do-
required.
They can require. So I guess that's beyond my knowledge. But maybe you know more about
No,
whether
I don't have any information on
Yeah,
that.
so that we'd have to look into that. I don't have a sense that. I'm not sure how they're gathering. I'd be interested to know what information they're gathering. I guess I don't know what they're gathering.
Well, it will affect people and animals
No,
and
I
bugs and
understand.
all
I
that.
understand the concern.
Yeah.
I don't know what metrics they're using to measure it
I
and
just-
how they're gathering that information in other cities. So if you know that information, I'd be
I
interested
have read
to know.
about that.
Yeah, I just don't know what they're gathering. One of the things that, when I had the meeting with Dr. Paul a couple of months ago, and we were talking about gathering that health data, and he had suggested, well, why doesn't the city fund some health studies? And I said, well, the city doesn't do that work. That's sort of not within our purview. But, one option would be to consider that maybe there would be graduate students at the University of Oregon that would be interested in collecting that kind of health data and providing that, and that they would get their, National Health Foundation funding or whatever to do that kind of research. The 5G has rolled out in a number of cities nationally already,
Yeah.
and so I don't know whether some of those other cities are collecting health data
Oh,
now.
yes, they
Well, I
are.
know in California,
Geneva.
there was a
Geneva.
lawyer that was able to shut down 16 cell towers in
Well,
California.
Geneva, the
That's a
health
foreign
effects.
country.
But
Well,
in
the
the
health
domestically,
effects-
domestically, I was
Well,
wondering
well,
about.
I just want to tell you that the health effects have come in and people are suffering.
Yes, we heard that at their
badly.
forum.
They're having headaches,
Right.
they're having heart palpitations, tinnitus, all kinds of neurological problems.
Right.
And so this is after a short period of time, so are you not
So,
concerned?
yeah, I'm totally concerned, and I'm not disputing that, but we live within a different federal system than Geneva. So,
Right, and I
so
wasn't
that's what
finished.
that's what I'm interested
I
in,
wasn't
is
finished.
domestically.
In California, there was a lawyer there, or a government relations specialist, who lived in Hillsborough, who shut down 16
Mhm.
cell towers.
Okay.
He knew how to do it.
Mhm.
And one of the requirements was an environmental health study. There was
Okay.
none done. So that was one of the ways that they shut that down. Also, no public notice, shut down, and a few other things.
Okay, so I don't know what their local regulations were
Oh,
exactly.
that's in California.
Okay.
So that's why I brought
Okay,
this
that's
up.
interesting, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you can find him on YouTube and his.
Okay, so remind me, what city was that?
Hillsborough, California,
okay.
Patrick Shannon.
Oh.
You can see his video with
I've
the
seen
council.
his stuff. You've sent me his things before.
Yeah, you can see him talking to the
Yeah.
council there.
Yeah, he's a physician in town. He's a
No,
physician.
he is not. He's a government regulations
government regu- okay,
specialist.
okay, gotcha.
Specialist. And he talks to the council for 10 minutes.
Okay.
And he accomplished shutting down,
Okay.
so 16 towers never came. They
Okay.
never got their permits.
So, yeah, so that'll be interesting to know what
To
the
listen.
circumstances were.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay, good.
And my next
Mhm.
question is, there is concern about property devaluation for homeowners with cell towers in front of their homes. I have verified with an attorney, in fact, it was that attorney, I called him,
Mhm.
in California, that a 25% or more devaluation of real estate has occurred due to the proximity to cell towers. Are you concerned about this and how it will affect the property tax money for the city? Like a home, say, that was worth $500,000 would lose $125,000 on property value upon sale. Homeowners could sue the city for loss of value. Please comment on this.
So, before this issue, the city did revisit, the council revisited the regulations around cell towers because of the aesthetic challenge that and so we have new regulations around cell tower locations, so we have done that work. These are, these new boxes are being primarily attached to existing telephone poles, so I don't anticipate unless it is someone who is, sensitive to electromagnetic frequencies, these are high up off the ground on existing poles. So unless that house is also feeling that the existing pole is an aesthetic detriment, we're not talking about new cell towers.
However-
We have regulated new cell towers.
However, they are a lot lower, and they're
Mhm.
just brown. They're not aesthetic in any way, shape, or form. And if people start recognizing these as 5G, it'll have the same effect.
It might. I can't answer to that, I don't know.
Also, just quickly, I know, can I get a mapping of those 27 installations? And-
Yeah, it's all through
It's on the
that
website.
app.
The city
So
website.
it's on the city website.
Yeah, well. 'cause
It's
there's-
hard
there's
to
a huge-
read.
Yeah, and also you said there's 24 that have not been installed yet?
So 51 permitted,
Yeah.
so the
Just-
27,
Were installed.
Installed,
So the
and then-
24 that's still coming?
yeah, that have not been installed, but
So
are permitted.
Are they gonna be installed?
We don't have, so they can apply for a permit and inside of that window, they can, so then they get a specific window of when those contractors can install that work, so they could miss that window and then they have to reapply.
One of those permitted installations is at Washington Park. Do you know where that is? My
Mhm, of
grandchildren
course,
all
of
live
course.
there and
Yeah.
play there,
Yeah.
right on the, like here's the park, it's right on the corner.
Right.
It'll be right there reading
It's
the
on an
kids.
existing pole.
But some
Yeah.
of them have been put on new poles.
Okay.
New
Where
poles.
there wasn't
They're
a pole.
erecting new
Where
poles,
there
they're
wasn't a
calling
pole.
them existing
No,
poles,
no,
but they're new poles.
on 24th and Charlottetown, on the corner there.
Mm-hmm.
We went there and they put up a new one. They took out the pole on the corner, right
Mhm.
here, and they put a new pole right next to it, and there's a place where the old pole was.
Uh-huh.
So they
It's-
did that.
They're
The
doing that.
replacement poles, yes,
The
they
replacement.
are allowed to replace a pole, but they can't.
They
if-
didn't put it in the same spot.
Yeah, I can't say specifically to it,
I was there.
Yeah,
It's
there's
this far
different
away
difference
from
to it.
the
It's a
Few
original.
feet, right, but.
No, it's more than 2 feet.
And they're taller,
Yeah.
they're different.
they can't for structural reasons
Yes.
to keep them, and those are all identified in the guidelines too. All that information we tried to spell out clearly.
And then
in
I
the guidelines.
understand they just, I'm not sure the date, there's one right in the middle of Tubman Park. Right in the middle,
Right,
where all the
right,
kids
it's
can
on the
play.
kids.
It's on the sidewalk, it's in the middle of the park?
Somebody
It's on
said
the
it was in the
sidewalk.
middle.
No,
In
it's
the
on
middle of the
it's on
sidewalk.
It's on the sidewalk.
In the
It's
middle
on
I
of
thought
the
it was in the
park on
middle
the
of the
side.
grass.
Yeah,
No, it's
Okay.
on the sidewalk.
It's on the sidewalk, it's on the arterial street there,
But
in the right
right
way.
where they play, yeah. Do
Okay?
you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. Are you willing to have a town hall meeting on 5G and officially
Louder.
inform, sorry. Are you willing to have a town hall meeting on 5G and officially inform the community about your continuing plans to permit the installation of 5G cell tower infrastructure in Eugene?
Well, I would not agree to the premise of the question, because I have done nothing to indicate that I am advocating for the promotion of 5G installation in the city.
well, to warn
Am I
people.
saying, am
to
I saying
warn
that you're
people about it.
promoting it?
No.
All I said was, and officially inform the community about your continuing plans to
My
permit.
continuing plans to
Do you
permit.
have plans to permit?
I personally do not have plans to permit.
Okay.
Well, the
Do you-
public works.
Excuse me, do you have plans to permit in the future?
So there are requirements that are set up through ordinances.
Yeah.
And if those requirements are met
Right,
through the guidelines, through different things, then yeah, then
right.
we'll
Okay, so
permit.
there's your answer.
Yeah.
So will you have a town hall meeting, which you should have had in the very beginning before one pole was put up or one antenna was put up? That is what governments usually do. They will have a town hall meeting because there are going to be, I'm guessing, thousands of these poles eventually in Eugene. Because I heard they have to be between 300 and 500 feet apart in order to fill in the gaps because they have a narrow beam. So putting thousands of antennas in front of houses, hospitals, schools, etc., it seems to me requires asking the people of Eugene if that's okay. And if they say no, it's hard for me to understand how the FCC can say yes.
Well-
And I just want to say one last thing. The FCC can never, ever, in any way or manner, make you do something that has not been proven safe. It's
We
just a
haven't-
fundamental
we have taken-
principle of life.
We have been taken to court on appeal on 3 different issues with Comcast. So yes, they will take us to court. Yes, we know they will take us to court.
They will lose
So-
if it's on that issue.
So I will tell you that our energy as a city is on control, on local control of our rights of way. That is the whole game as far as we are concerned right now. And there are many risks, many things at stake for the city of Eugene, including the potential health risks of 5G, but many things at stake. And so my feeling is that the city needs to keep on doing the hard work we are doing to maintain and reassert our local control of our rights of way and to fend off the FCC's efforts to deprive us of control over our rights of way. That is the fundamental battle, and it's a huge one. And we are working to rally the rest of other cities in that battle because it is the key issue. So
If the court decided, the Ninth Circuit decided that cities had the jurisdiction over the rights of way, what would be the first thing to change?
then that changes. The first piece around this has to do whether we can, it has to do with whether we can charge the telecommunications companies for what they're installing.
Is that your only concern?
It is
or-
not our only concern, it's the baseline concern. Because even wireless technology costs money to install, and the way the FCC regulations are written now, they can install it on the taxpayer back without paying for
So
it.
would you,
So they're installing technology that we don't want, and they're not paying for it.
right, so
So-
would you impose a moratorium if the Ninth Circuit said, yes, the cities have jurisdiction?
I'm not the legal expert in terms of saying when this happens, then the next thing happens. I'm not in a safe place to speculate on that, but that is the sort of critical first piece that has to happen for us. So I'll just say, let's get the first thing done.
I have just a follow-up question on these installations. I hope this is not right. I hope we wouldn't be basing things on the proof of harm approach rather than the precautionary approach, because proof of harm means that you could be losing family members to this. So if these were installed and we found out quickly that these were having adverse effects on people's health, how quickly can we have them uninstalled?
I don't have the right information to be able to answer that.
This is where I think the rollout in the other cities will be helpful, because they're ahead of us, right? They have it now, and so if they're gathering health data domestically, I understand about Geneva, but there are 10 other cities between Verizon and AT&T that are now going live on the 5G. So it seems to me that's going to be sort of the critical. They're the vanguard. That's sort of the critical testing point, and those are major cities. So if those cities are gathering negative impacts from it, then we get to rest our case on that, we get to follow on that. So that's I think our strongest suit. We're farther down the line in terms of the activation of 5G, so we get to hopefully ride on the experience of the cities that are going ahead of us.
That's a good question. Do you know when they're going to be turning this on?
That's the telecommunications. That's telecommunications companies. We're not in the telecommunications industry.
But
So
if you
that's
could
not
slow
the
it
Public
down,
Works.
if you could slow it down, so we're waiting for these other cities and what happens, it would be helpful if you could slow it down here in Eugene.
No, I hear you. I totally hear you. I totally hear you.
And to that, is there any way that we can work with you and your department if we find ways to slow it down? Would you be open to hearing some suggestions and maybe ways to do it?
And we're always looking for ways to improve our processes, our procedures, things like that. I can't make any commitments by any stretch of the imagination, but it goes back to kind of the recent things of what we've done, where we've tightened up our guidelines, or not tightened, but changed our guidelines, and looking to get these small cell facilities on arterials as opposed to residential. So the arterial would be the first choice.
The arterial, it was put on an arterial that's right in front of a whole row of residences.
Mhm.
How do we combat against that? Does that have a provision in the new rule?
So there are, we have a matrix at this point, and one of those, so we start with, is this on a residential, then bump it to an arterial. There are aesthetic guidelines that we have in there as well, where we take preference to not have it directly in front of the house as well.
Oh, good. Is there any way we can get a copy or access to
Yeah, it's
this?
all that, we already have it online. We don't have the new information as far as the 500-foot radius yet. That's still not updated in the guidelines, but that's something that we have communicated with those contractors and with companies already.
Can I email you and
Yeah, absolutely.
send it away?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just want to say it's 5 o'clock. So are you pretty satisfied? Is there some last burning question that somebody
Did you get
wants
your
to
question asked?
throw
Yes.
out?
Oh, I just have a couple just overarching ones.
Uh-huh.
You're an oath-taking elected official.
mhm.
I'm just curious, do you feel as a mayor that Eugene, acting on behalf of his residents, lacks the constitutional authority to decide his own permitting process concerning land use or zoning issues in his own jurisdiction? Do you feel that's...
No, I wouldn't. That's a pretty broad statement, so no, I would not say that. But I don't think that's the question, whether we have constitutional authority on our land use. That's not the question here. The question is a very specific one around the installation of telecommunications facilities, which is regulated by the FCC.
But it's on our
Yeah,
land.
it is. It's
and
our right-of-way.
zone,
That's why
right?
we're in this fundamental court case about local
So-
control over rights-of-way. Yeah, that's the
Right.
question.
So would you feel that the city does have the constitutional authority to control that zoning and permitting on its
We
own?
absolutely believe that we have should have authority over our rights-of-way.
Then why don't you stop them installing
We're
until
trying.
this gets
We're
settled?
we
And
are
then my other-
trying to get. We are going to court
My other
But
question...
can't you stop it until that's settled?
because until that's settled, the FCC has they're regulating and they're claiming
Tell them to
authority.
go to you know where.
That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah,
In the court.
yeah. They don't live here.
I think
Colin?
My other question is just very generally speaking, because there's a lot of these movements happening now, is do you believe the city, acting under the behalf of its residents, has a constitutional right to raise safety standards beyond the minimum standards set by the federal government?
We do not have the right under legal authority now to do that. No.
Local city cannot
We cannot
raise-
regulate based on health.
I believe there
We
are
cannot
cities doing
excuse me,
that.
let me be very specific as far as I understand. We cannot, if a telecommunications system complies with FCC standards, we can only regulate based on design and siting. So we are not authorized to regulate based on health.
That's strictly.
That's it.
Strictly
That's the way
do
the law
that.
reads.
Then
That's the way the
strictly
law
do.
reads.
But
Yep.
you could be really strict about that.
Well, the law reads environment. It doesn't say
Yeah.
anything about
Right.
health. It says environment. But that's the FCC's ruling, and we have jurisdiction. You have jurisdiction over the FCC.
No, they have, in this case, we have to comply with FCC statutes.
That's not
It's
gonna be-
debatable, but
that's
we need the
not gonna-
constitutional
It
lawyer.
won't be resolved here. It
Yeah.
won't be resolved.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, thank you for your
Thank you. It's
time.
gnarly.
Yeah.
It's gnarly and it's
Yeah.
worrisome, and I'm with you on it. So
Yeah.
I just want you to hear that I'm not, we're working on this. It's a deep concern.
I was just wondering, your mayor's conference,
Mhm.
what kind of reception did you get with it?
Oh, I've got a pretty enthusiastic reception. So I was not the only mayor to present on our concerns about the telecommunications industry and the FCC. And this was a panel, and there were 5 of us that presented, and mine was a real call to arms, like, let's do the work, but I was not the only one. So the mayor of Plano was there, and things are going on in Texas, which are very alarming. So, we're all facing this challenge, and so yeah, it was a really important moment to say we really have to do this work because
Well, thank you.
Did
we're losing
anyone
control.
mention the health effects or the health danger?
I will tell you that this was really very much focused on this question of rights of way and local control, and that the FCC was overreaching and sort of infringing upon those rights. So that for all of the cities, this is sort of the essential issue, and if we can address that successfully, then it positions us to do other things.
Are the public works guidelines passed by the board, or do they have their own board that approves those guidelines, or how does
That is something that we,
you just do single-handedly?
yeah,
the
we
permitting
come
process?
up with those guidelines and style and guidelines, and those are something that we've adopted and changed over the last, let's see, 2014. We have the dates on the actual documents themselves.
Yeah,
So
I
if
think
you
the
can
cell phone regulations may have been at 20, I don't know when the cell tower, there was some discussion of changing the cell towers, I don't know how recently that happened, so council will weigh in, on that policy level, but when it gets down to the implementation, it's up to staff to
Some-
define that in rules.
This is just an aside. Someone was mentioning the possibility of having like a commission that deals with wireless, like a public citizen commission, like the sustainability
watchdog group.
commission.
Well, you do have that at the state level.
I mean, at the city level, like the
Yeah.
sustainability commission, a public
Yeah.
group that works with the city, that advises the city.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always open to ideas about how to do this.
When you listen to the video
Yeah.
of the California attorney,
Yeah.
there is a watchdog group in that town, and they
Right.
have to be reported to by the city, but unfortunately they didn't report to them, so they got in trouble.
We have in the city staff, we have a couple of, the city and I would say the Lane Council of Governments, we have some pretty high level expertise of staff who follow the telecommunications industry and have done so for many years. And so we really count on their backlog of expertise. They've walked through all of these different suits against the telecommunications industry. They work with the state on it. So we really count on that expertise. So it actually, Eugene, I think, is fortunate, even though I know you have misgivings about our legal counsel, but actually the city of Eugene has a huge amount of experience in this and has pursued it pretty diligently. So I think, I don't know whether we need a watchdog group, particularly because I think the city's doing the work, but there could be an advisory, a role
Yeah,
for an
like an
advisory
advisory
group,
group.
and, it's, kind of figuring out what that mandate would be and what they would bring to the table. I'm
Yeah.
sort of open to that conversation.
Yeah, because the health issue isn't really
Health is
being looked
gnarly. The
at,
health is gnarly because we
being
can't do
considered.
that work. So it's just a gnarly one for us to tackle as a city because it's so outside of our realm, right?
But you're responsible for our health.
Well, the county
safety.
and it's the county, so I mean that's the other conversation here, right? It's the county that has the health department, not the city of Eugene. So if someone's going to do health studies, that would be Lane County Public Health that would do it, not the city of Eugene. So I guess that's the other piece of homework for you is to sort of recognize that about health work resides in the county, not in the city.
So the city
We
is
don't
not
have-
concerned with.
No. Oh, that's not it. The city doesn't have a Department of Health. Not that we're not concerned. We don't have a department that does that work. We don't have expertise within the city that does that work. The county does that work. That's a division of
Do you
jurisdictional
work with
authority.
them? Do you work with the county?
Of course we do.
health
Of course we do. Yeah. So, but I'm just saying they would have to fund that. They would have to accept that as a policy and a mandate and do that work.
Thank you.
I have one
Yeah.
more thing to say.
Yeah.
Well, we've been doing this for 8 months,
Mhm.
talking to you guys,
Mhm.
and I think the frustration comes when we don't hear anything back, when you guys don't talk to us. And that's why we want a town hall, so people can get answers, because our frustration level builds so high. You just say, thank you very much, your time is up. That's really frustrating.
But
Because
not
no,
only
I'm talking
for
'cause-
that
because
reason.
we put so much work into this. We've basically stopped our lives. Our life is this now. And so we need the council to talk to us. We need answers back.
So I appreciate that, and I appreciate the frustration. It is really why I said months ago, and why I have followed through on that, is that I am open to meeting with you so that you get this time to have a direct and in-depth conversation with me. So I did it a couple of months ago with Martin Paul. I opened the door again to do it this time. I have said to you that I'll meet with you on a regular and
Can the
consistent basis.
counselors meet with us?
It's up to counselors. Individual counselors manage their own priorities and their own schedules.
We did ask Alan,
Zelenko.
one of them, we asked him if he would talk to us or meet with us many times. He never replied to us.
Right. Yeah. Well, he's a busy guy. He's got a full-time job, and he's also a counselor. So, counselors have to do a certain amount of triage of what their time is. Yeah.
But why we really need a public call on this is that most of Eugene is in the dark about the 5G issue. They don't even know what's being put up by their homes and schools. They have no idea.
Right.
you
I hear
know.
that.
And it's
So-
not unfair.
So the first piece is the work session, and just reach out to me again when you want to have another meeting, and we'll set it up.
Maybe you could have one counselor at least at the meeting.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
happy to, in this case, what I had said to council is that I will take the lead on this, and so I will always, following your suggestion, I will let counselors know that I'm planning to have a meeting and that any of them are invited to attend, recognizing that if we have all of them, or if we have a quorum of them, it becomes a public meeting and we have to do a public notice and everything else, so it becomes more of a town hall, so.
So that's what we'd like.
Right, and we might get there. I'm apprehensive about doing that when we are not, when council hasn't had a work session yet, and we haven't sort of gone through a deliberative process about what information do we have, what information do we need. So,
Seems like there should have been a work session before any poll went up, at all. There should have been something.
well, maybe so, but here's where we are.
Here's where we are.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
let's slow it
Thank you
down.
so
Thank
much.
you so much.
Thank you.